Hello and welcome back to the Faith and Culture Show. I'm Catherine Camp, your hostess for this show. And this is where we dig deeply into what's going on in our culture. And we do this so that we can have educated conversations with our culture around us. Conversations that count, conversations with an eternal perspective. Today I have a real treat for you. I have someone that the type of person I've never had on before. I've hinted at it with other shows, but today we have Dr. William Gawthrop. He's a retired intelligence analyst of the United States government, and he is a current university instructor and of strategic intelligence. I'm so excited about this. I cannot even tell you. Dr. Gawthrop has his PhD in criminal justice from Walden University and his master's in science and strategic intelligence, Joint Military Intelligence College. He has a book called The Criminal Investigator Intelligence Analyst's Handbook of Islam. He speaks on terrorism and counterterrorism. He is well-versed and educated on the tactics of the enemy. I feel that he is more than qualified to speak on the topic of terrorist tactics. For many of us, we recognize that something has not been right for the past 2 decades, probably even more, but we just cannot put our finger on it. Today, we have the opportunity to meet and speak with a professional in this area. I want to welcome Dr. Gawthrop. Hello and welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bill Gawthrop, and I will be your panel discussion for today.
And this is going to be very interesting. So many of you who are really interested in this, please take out your pencils and pads, and we're going to have a slide, and Dr. Gawthrop is going to lead us through this. First, I wanted to ask you just a little bit, Dr. Gawthrop, can you define for us from your point of view, what is terrorism?
Okay. Terrorism is an act of defiance. It has no rules. Terrorism can be religiously based, from the Amish to the jihadists of Islam. Terrorism can be secular or religious. The problem is we are discussing Islam and not jihad. Since 9/11, we have been the victims of jihad, not terrorism. Jihad is a legal obligation, and it's a religious act of devotion. It is rule bound, and we have not been discussing the legal aspects, the religious aspects, or the attending rules of engagement. As a result, when we talk about an act of violence, we say it's terrorism, and we avoid the discussions that would lead us to truly understanding that it's jihad and a way to defeat it.
Wow, I've never heard of it described that way. Most of us think that terrorism, we think of suicide bombers, and we think of people attacking a culture. We saw that in Israel last year, happened to them. So now that we have a better description of this, and this can happen anywhere, explain how counterterrorism looks.
Okay. Understand that terrorism and counterterrorism is the lowest level of fighting in a civilizational conflict. Dr. Samuel Huntington wrote about the clash of civilizations, and he named several civilizations: the Sinic, the Chinese, the Japanese, the Orthodox, the Russians, the Western civilization, the United States and Europe and Australia, and then the Islamic civilization. The wars that we have seen in history have generally been along civilizational lines. For example, Napoleon, Western civilization, attacked Russia, Orthodox civilization. Hitler attacked Russia, Western civilization attacking the Orthodox civilization. Japan attacked China. That's the Japanese civilization versus the Sinic civilization. When Japan attacked Russia in 1905, that was Japan versus the Orthodox. When Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, that became Japanese versus Western. With all of that background, we look at Islam. Islam is attacking everybody because it is, and this is a term that you should write down, a civilizational challenger or a challenger civilization. And as a result, because of the rules of jihad, it is duty bound by the mandate of Allah to engage in hostilities with other civilizations for the purpose of subjugating those other civilizations to jihad. I'm sorry, to Islam. And jihad is the tool.
Okay.
Jihad is one tool, but the other tool is dawah, which is proselyting. So you've got the violent application of force and persuasive force working together for a single focused goal, suzerainty over the world. So what happens then when you have an individual practicing jihad at the neighborhood level, a random stabbing of a Jew on the street or anybody else, that is the clash of civilizations at the individual level. Classic example, when the U.S. Marine Corps was fighting the Japanese in the South Pacific, and there was an individual Marine against an individual Japanese soldier, that was still the clash of civilizations at the individual level. So when you hear about an incident of jihad, mistakenly called terrorism, what you're actually looking at is the clash of civilizations, and we need to understand it in a civilizational context.
Okay. So lately we've heard a lot about China and how they want to become the dominant force in the world. And I'm not sure how we should be looking at this. I know this has nothing to do with your slide, or it might. I don't know. Trying to get to the bottom of what's happening in our culture, in our world.
Okay.
So what do they have to do? Is this also cultural or is this something different? Because they are a communist country.
China is a distinct civilization. Unique to China is that it has not fought an expansionist war for over 3,000 years. It has fought border adjustments and it has defended itself when it became concerned about border security. For example, Korea. China is prone to using diplomatic, ideological, and economic leverage, not so much military leverage. China is also given to great and grand projects, the Great Leap Forward, the Three Gorges Dam, the Chinese, the Great China Wall. She has always had a strategic perspective. The Chinese think in terms of decades and centuries, while the Americans think in terms of 4 years. 4 years for this administration, 4 years for that administration. And if you have an abrupt change in administrations, the philosophy of administration A becomes aborted by administration B and takes the Americans off on a new trajectory. The Chinese have a long-term goal. For example, the reunification of Formosa or Taiwan is part of their border adjustment philosophy. They want to reassert the original borders of China back to including Taiwan or Formosa. To do that, she is positioning herself to compete with the United States in such a way that when there is a confrontation between the United States and China over Taiwan, China will prevail. For example, she is building a naval capability, not a blue navy, blue sea navy like the Americans have, but just enough to exert control over its borders and deny the U.S. military the ability to render aid to Taiwan in a timely manner.
Wow.
Now, to facilitate her initiatives along her border, she's also reaching deep into the United States. For what purposes? For example, she's buying up a lot of real estate,
Yes.
farmland close to military installations, and there's a certain logic to the Chinese maneuvers that will increase her capability to apply pressure point influence on the United States to retard our ability to render aid to Taiwan. So things are shaping up to a great contest. The question is, will it go nuclear? Anybody's guess. I don't think so. But China has a long-term strategy. She's interested in border adjustments, and Formosa or Taiwan is her primary focus as it stands right now.
Wow. I was at a conference last year, and there was a group of young people, and they were talking about the Belt Road Initiative. And this kind of sounds like what you're saying. These strategies are strategies that take time, but they just keep marching forward, and there's no one there who seems to stop them. What can you tell us about the Belt Road Initiative? They kept saying it was bad. They said, you've got to stop this. They were worried.
Yeah.
They were, I think, what they were called the New Federation of China. And it's a young group of people who have started this this organization to educate people about how China is, looking for world domination. And they mentioned the Belt Road Initiative.
Yeah, that one is a little bit outside of my scope. I'm primarily an Islamic law guy. I look at China from the context of challenger civilization and its immediate threat to the United States, but I haven't delved too far in the outer bands of that particular bullseye.
Okay.
I'm more focused on the center ring of the Islamic threat.
Okay. And I did see that as I was perusing all of your work on academia.edu. So we can probably move on. Do you want to go ahead and start talking about the slide that you sent me?
Sure, bring up the slide.
Okay, let's do that. Talk about this slide that you sent me, and I am so glad that we're going to talk about this because, as I mentioned in the intro, there's things going on, and I believe that so many people are asleep because we've been propagandized to death over many, many years. And I think that's why I reached out to you, because I have seen an interview with Yuri Bezmenov. I know we're not going to talk about him today because we want to start basic and move everybody into understanding the importance of what is happening and what we need to watch out for and not fall for. So you start wherever you would normally start.
Okay. At the present, there are two political parties in the United States, Democrat and Republican. This slide alludes to the Democrats. And there has been tension between the Democrat and Republican Party since before the Civil War. And the Democrats also have a long-term strategy, and nobody's really been able to make sense of it until just recently. And this slide sort of encompasses what that strategy is all about. There are two phases for a political party trying to get power: acquire power and then maintain power. So what we have is a political party who has ideological roots that are not aligned with the founding fathers. The slide illustrates that the Democrats' underlying political philosophy is derived from social democracy, some degree of federalism, a lot of socialism, communism, collectivism, and Marxism.
Okay.
Now,
Can we, now some people watching may not understand what each of those are. Like, can you just briefly define for us those things, like starting at social democracy?
Catherine, let me stop just for a second.
Oh, okay.
Okay, this slide represents the forces at work in one political party, which basically boils down to the Democrat Party. The ideological roots of the Democrat Party are not necessarily founded in the founding fathers. They are aligned more with social democracy, federalism, socialism, communism, collectivism, and Marxism. And these would be subject to another briefing where we could go into detail and talk about each one of the criteria for each one of those categories.
That would be great.
Yeah. Now, the next item is, if you take a look at the ideological proponents, we see Marx, Engels, Holland, Chomsky, and Alinsky. And the modern day proponents would be Pelosi, Clinton, and a couple others. And these represent the thinkers who are providing the inertia for the Democrat Party. Now, let's take a look at the Democrat Party's platform.
Okay.
The 5 items that we have here: no voter ID. There is a chart that will show that the states that have no voter ID voted Democrat in this last election, and the states that have voter ID voted Republican. So the absence of voter ID becomes a mechanism for vote influence. Now, the next item is closely aligned to no voter ID. Make DC, Puerto Rico a state. Now, these would create additional blue states for the Democrat Party, at least on the surface. We see now that Puerto Rico actually voted Republican. But the initiative to having no voter ID and making DC and Puerto Rico a state is kind of related to packing the Supreme Court to dilute the conservative voice. Now, with regard to no voter ID and making Puerto Rico and DC a state, what happens then with the open borders that we have, you begin to inflate the population. And when you inflate the population, what you are doing is inflating the count for the 2030 census. The 2030 census counts population, not citizens. So you have a population shift of, some counts say, 15 million people. And if you add DC and Puerto Rico, that's 2 more jurisdictions. And what happens is that you realign electoral college votes away from the red states to the blue states, strengthening the electoral vote strength of the Democrats. So then, with that, you have a very, very steep hill for the conservatives, the Republicans, to climb to defeat Democrats in the next election. Now, At the same time that these four initiatives are taking place, you'll see that the Democrats are also conducting another attack on the American culture, undermining our institutional integrity and destroying traditions. Now remember that government has two responsibilities: to protect its enduring values and institutions, and to protect its citizens. The Democrats have been engaging in tearing down our values and institutions.
Mm-hmm.
And you've seen it with destruction of statues, the burning of the American flag, the disregard for voter integrity. A litany of issues have come under attack because the Democrats. Now, all of these things are intended to acquire power. Once that power is acquired, and I'm talking about this last election, if they had won, then we would get into the red zone of maintaining power. Understand that there have been efforts to eliminate the Electoral College. Now, that may be a desirable goal for the left, but it's a practical goal. You would have to have a constitutional amendment. But the Electoral College is a target.
Yes.
And if they had uh, voter strength in the blue states, based on what you see in the yellow activity box there, they would have the votes to change the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the next thing they would try to do to maintain power is pack the Supreme Court. And every time you hear that somebody say we need to have 6 more people appointed to the Supreme Court to make it 15 or whatever a number, that is part of this agenda to maintain power, because we know that elections have consequences, lawsuits are filed, and they are always referred to the courts. And we've already seen where Democrat versus Republican judges have two widely divergent views on the issues under scrutiny.
Yeah, they do.
Now, the next item is restricting the First Amendment. The Democrats have had remarkable influence with Facebook. They had remarkable influence with Twitter until Elon Musk came along and set it free.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when a Democrat says that we shouldn't say that, or you can't say that, or we're not going to talk about that, that's restricting freedom of speech. The suppression of students on campus, the cancel culture, all of
Mm-hmm.
these things are designed to stop discussions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the next item is restrict or repeal the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is about self-defense. If you take away the citizens' weapons, they're no longer citizens, they're subjects. And the thing to remember is that these 4 items here represent the 4 traditional boxes that America is founded on: the ballot box, the jury box, the soap box, and the cartridge box.
Mm.
And the
Wow.
Democrat agenda is to control those 4 boxes. Now, if the Democrats had won this last election, they would have transcended from the yellow box to the red box. They've been trying to acquire power. If Kamala Harris had been elected, they would have gotten power, and then the next 4 years would have been devoted to maintaining power. And these would have been the targets. There would have been a swelling of migration influx to inflate the census count. There would have been the decriminalization of violence against our institutions, our values, and the idea is to tear down the American value system and replace it. And these are real issues that are in play. And this last election stopped between the yellow and the red box. We did not lose that election. If we ever do, these four items, the Electoral College, the Supreme Court, and the First and Second Amendment, will be under attack again.
Wow, that's terrifying, really. And I think a lot of my audience has been understanding that this would happen, that they would really move forward quickly. I see what they've also done, and I think, well, let me finish my thought. What they've also done is attack us on a medical side of things to weaken us with bioterrorism. And I don't know if you even look into that as a counterterrorism specialist, but I think there was an article or a study done in the NIH years ago, maybe a decade and a half ago, perhaps, where they did a study on what would be the most effective way to take control over a population. And the answer was on the site was an invisible enemy. And a virus is an invisible enemy. And I don't know how you view that. Have you thought about that as a terrorism specialist?
I have not. I know a lot of people spend a lot of time dwelling on that.
Yeah.
I look at the environment around that threat, the social control associated with, for example, the COVID control techniques. Remember, they tried to restrict freedom of speech. Don't question the science.
Right.
Well, questioning science is science.
Yeah.
But you couldn't do that on the social media platforms. So, with regard to the specific threats being posed by chemical biological warfare, that's a little bit outside the scope of the Democrat Party, but not outside the scope of some of the liberal thinking.
Okay. Personally, I'm beginning to see our country as a uniparty and really not so much as two parties. It seems like they're beginning to merge, because it seems like when the Republican Party is in a position of getting things done, nothing gets done. Yet when the Democrats are in position, they just march forward and they do not stop and they do not look back.
Okay, it's a valid observation. People who have a conquering agenda are activists. People who do not have a conquering agenda tend to not be as aggressive. However, when their back is pushed to the wall, conservatives can and do fight back. And I think we're going to see that the next few weeks.
I hope so. I hope so. Because I think many of us conservatives, and I'm a Christian, and I feel like a target, or I have felt like a target, and many of us have.
Well, you have been. You have been, and here's how I can demonstrate that.
Okay.
Go back to the yellow slide, undermine institutional integrity, destroy traditions, politicize process. Obama waged lawfare against Hobby Lobby, Chick-fil-A, Christian makers, and that was sort of picked up under the Biden administration as well. Lawfare is a very sophisticated tool of camouflage to exert control over society. In the United States, the preferred tool is not the jackboot, but the legal system. And so under Obama, we saw the legal system being used against institutions of faith. And that's part of the liberal agenda to undermine our enduring values and traditions.
Wow. Okay, so that is valid because many of us have felt that way. And yes, under Obama, I remember him asking for the actual notes and I guess research material for any pastor. I think there were 9 or 11 that he targeted.
Well, a current example was Kamala Harris. When somebody said, Jesus loves you in a forum, she said, I think you're in the wrong forum.
That spoke volumes. And,
yes.
and unfortunately, I think there are some Christians who still don't get it. And that, whether they may have thought it was added in, but it definitely wasn't. Someone said Jesus is Lord, and she said you're at the wrong rally.
A cautionary note.
Yes.
No matter what kind of threat, you're going to find people who are in denial and won't respond to it. It can't happen here, or it's not going to happen to me. Those people, I don't want to say you're wasting your time with, but you need to refocus on those who do respond and then facilitate their movement to safety. Darwin works. Let Darwin work.
What does that mean?
Say again?
What does that mean?
Charles Darwin, survival of the fit. There are some people who are just not going to try to preserve themselves.
Okay. Well, there are a lot of people in denial, and that's why we're going to get more into this the propaganda, the brainwashing that has been going on for several decades. And I remember the interview I saw with Yuri Bezmenov, and I think he was with Edward Griffin. He just said, in 1986, I think it could be 87, but he stated that the American people were so brainwashed at that point, he wasn't sure why the enemy wasn't moving in.
Yeah.
Even at that point. So that's a long time ago.
Yeah, there are some threats that people do not comprehend. Now remember, our fathers and grandfathers grew up at a very different time in America, time of hardship. Polio, smallpox, deprivation, drought, famine, poverty. Then World War I, World War II. These were hard men. The greatest generation endured a lot, and they shaped their perspective. And we have gotten a little bit softer since then. And we need to toughen up a little bit.
I agree. We need more people to realize what is happening in order for us to find a place where we can fit to push back, especially conservatives. We haven't done much when, even at the polls, as an election official, there are more Democrats signed up to do those jobs than there are conservatives. And that becomes a problem when the counting starts.
Maybe.
We were just talking about the election officials that are at polling places. And sometimes it can be a problem. We saw that happen in 2020, how it was a problem in certain cities, not everywhere. So I think people need to start getting busy and changing things.
Yeah, there are three things you can do. First of all, the state and county elections for the election officials are not really contested. And so what I would encourage people to do is run for office. Now, there's a technique for doing this. Put your hat in the ring for political office. Then go down to the Board of Elections and get the voter registration list for the people who voted in the last 4 elections, primaries and general, primaries and general. Invariably, that list is on an Excel spreadsheet. Then you sort out all of the people who have voted religiously for primary and general election in the last 4 elections. And then you figure out who your philosophical allies are, Democrat, liberal, or independent. And then, knowing that these people are going to vote in the next election, you run down and you get a fistful of postcards. Now, postcards are expensive. I can remember when they were 3 cents a piece.
Right.
Now they're like a buck and a half or 50 cents a piece. But an aggressive letter writing campaign tailored to those people who vote is a first step that you can get with the post office and figure out how to print up a flyer and get a bulk rate for reduced postage.
Yeah.
You see it all the time when you get a letter from some charitable organization and they've paid like 4.7 cents per letter. But the trick is to get involved and then identify the voters. And you do that by getting the voter registration list and finding out who's been voting religiously in the last 4 elections, primary, general, primary, and general. And then you reach out to them.
Okay. Now, yes, and if that's not your cup of tea, there are so many other things. There's the education system that is under attack. The faith system, of course, that's under attack. Many people are now changing their tax exempt status to 501c8s so that they're not attacked under the 501c3. And we need to really raise awareness of what you just showed us, Dr. Gawthrop. So this is where it's important to really learn what's going on. Would you call this, when the liberal side of things, or people that are involved with this movement, because I believe that there are, on both sides, we have people who are for some reason, they want to tear down this country. Would you consider everything you just showed us on your slide a form of terrorism? Or am I just kind of taking that too far?
Remember, terrorism is an act of defiance and has no rules. Conservatives are generally rule bound. They have morals and values. The other side, not so much.
Okay.
So you're going to have to look at how the other side fights to figure out a way to respond and maintain your ethics and values. And that means letters to the editor, going to meetings at the school board. If you are with a group of people, find out who the Elks Lodge members are, the Moose Lodge members, the Rotary Club, and use these social organizations and reach out and offer to speak to their membership when they have their meeting nights and say, My name is Oliver T. Shagnasty. I'm a resident of this area, and I'm interested in school board issues or the water issues or whatever. And here's what I believe, and here's some business cards. Let me know if you are interested. But reach out, use those social organizations. When you drive from city to city, you will see a roadside sign that says all of the clubs and activities, Rotary Club, Moose, Oddfellows, blah, blah, blah. Those are centers of influence. So reach out to them. Letters to the editor. A letter to the editor is not that hard to write. A technique for writing a good letter to the editor is get a 4x6 card and list all your facts on the front face of that 4x6 card. And then write your letter around each of those 4 facts using paragraph headings. Most letters to the editor are a sea of words. But if you take the time to insert a 2-word paragraph heading like Second Amendment, hospital security, or neighborhood safety, and then write a little passage on that, those paragraph headings help people identify the key points. They're eye catchers. Years ago, U.S. News and World Report had a summary of the important news, and what they would do would be to highlight in bold print key words in each of the news items, and you could scan very quickly to the points that you wanted to see. So you're reading a newspaper, and you've got the letter to the editor in there, and you happen to see a bold paragraph heading that says Second Amendment. That's going to draw people's attention to that article. So reach out to the organizations, write letters to the editor, run for office, and occasionally invite your neighbors over for a backyard party or what have you, and invite a local legislator or government official to come and give a talk. Turn your living room into a studio.
Those are great ideas. Lately, I have thought about myself. We have a little local restaurant that has a back room, and they have a big screen television back there. And my thought was there's so many great documentaries that have come out lately, just exposing the corruption in our country, that I thought maybe once a month showing these documentaries and inviting pastors, inviting our local candidates. One of our congressmen is from our area, so inviting him, the sheriff, just kind of raising awareness so that they are aware of what's happening, and they are influential. Our delegates, our city council people, we actually have a board of directors because we're just a small county and we want to keep it that way. So, so those are great ideas, and I would encourage everyone to get out there and do that. Have picnics, invite people over.
Sure.
That's brilliant. So I guess I think we've really covered a lot of territory today. Next time we meet, it's whatever you want, whatever you think will fall in line. We can either discuss, let me bring that slide back up, the ideological roots in each, like social democracy, and get those definitions for people, and ideological proponents. Because now I did a 5-part series on Marxism 3 or 4 years ago, because I could see where we were headed, and I really want people to go back and look at those. But these these philosophical beliefs really they keep marching on. They
Yeah.
don't go away.
Yeah,
So
I'd be more than happy to explore that with you in detail.
okay, wonderful. Yeah, because it's important for us to understand what's happening to us instead of just accepting it. We need to make sure that we know how to push back. If you don't understand your enemy, then you don't know how to do a counter,
Yes,
whatever it is
absolutely.
that they're doing.
And you have to fight back.
You can't just sit and think someone else is going to do it.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I know that you have a cold right now or some allergies, and so I'm going to let you go.
Okay.
But I thank you so much for joining us today, and I'm very excited to have you back. So everyone, please look, keep watching out for our next show together, so that we can get more information and be educated, and then we can speak clearly to others who are confused about what's happening or are in denial, like many are. But so thank you so much, Dr.
All right.
Gawthrop.
Take care and have a good day.
Thank you. You too.